I do have a lot of years of experience in the field, about 30 years.
So do
You're
you
right.
think that there is any positive aspect which can help a person?
Like you said, relationships.
Yeah, relationships is a pretty common one for sure. It's challenging for me as well because I have very strong feelings working with the person. Their bodies are holding the feelings. It's caring. And I really love solving problems.
I can relate to that too.
There's a bit called emotion.
People might not have enough time to meditate. Sometimes they forget and all those things.
Preventive
Yeah,
care is still more affordable than going to a reactive care, right?
I would imagine that there are feelings involved in a person saying these things because there are many, many feelings people have.
One of my closest friends, so he's facing generally a problem regarding his job career,
They're really intelligent people.
but current market is not very appropriate.
All you need to do is pee, go back home. And that's going to be probably the satisfying pee of your life. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Break the Matrix, where we explore fascinating topics to help you better understand yourself and the world around you. I'm your host, Bharadwaj. Joining me are co-hosts Satvik and Shravan. And we have a very important panelist today with us. And Satvik, take it away and please introduce our panelist.
Hello, everyone. Joining us today, we have Mary Ann Forster, a licensed clinical social worker with tremendous years of experience helping individuals navigate their mental health challenges and provide guidance to them. Mary Ann, welcome to the podcast. The stage is all yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself as you see fit for our audience.
Thank you very much, Satvik. I appreciate being invited to be on your podcast. I'm excited to be here. I do have a lot of years of experience in the field, about 30 years or so. I got my bachelor's degree from Rutgers University in 1991 and my master's degree in 1993. And I've been working since that time, since my graduate degree, working directly in terms of helping people through psychotherapy. As I began initially working in a community mental health agency where I provided outpatient psychotherapy to children and teenagers and adults, individuals, couples, families in all different kinds of walks of life, all different kinds of issues, which was a very big teaching ground for me as well too. I left that position and became the director of an outpatient department in a community mental health agency called the Mental Health Association of Essex County in Montclair, New Jersey. So I was the director of an outpatient department serving people who couldn't afford to be able to get mental health services, people who had no health insurance or who only had Medicare or Medicaid and who otherwise would have a really hard time, especially being able to find qualified services. So we collaborated with therapists in the community who provided, they were experienced therapists who would see people on a sliding scale basis, very low scale. And I worked there for 10 years and got to work both as a director, but I did a lot of direct work, evaluations of individuals and supervision of graduate students and about 25 therapists, about 125 clients were in the program. It was extremely rewarding and satisfying and challenging. In 2001, I started there in 2001. In 2010, I left there to be able to pursue full-time private practice. I'd already been doing part-time private practice for quite a number of years before that. So I've been working for myself, doing private practice psychotherapy. I largely work with individuals, sometimes with couples, far less probably with families, mostly with adults. And I consider myself very, very fortunate to have found the field that I love, that is satisfying, and that I know makes a difference, and that I learn from all the time, and that it continuously challenges me, which is, I do feel very blessed for that reason. Not everybody loves what they do, and I do. and it gives me a living as well. I'm a big advocate for sure, and I'm happy to answer questions today. I don't know what more you'd like me to say.
That is an absolutely brilliant introduction.
Thank you.
I am so glad you like the work that you do.
I do. And actually, it's funny that I'm actually missing out on mentioning the biggest form of education that I received postmasters while I was working at the agency I mentioned, where I was the director of the outpatient department. I got connected to an individual who has really been a mentor to me. This is another therapist who's about 92 years old now, I've been getting support from. And she strongly encouraged me to look into studying psychoanalysis. And I did end up enrolling in that, thinking in the beginning, why am I doing this? I'm not going to go to school anymore. Like, this is enough. And I went for one semester and completely fell for it, because I knew people who had that training and had that education, and I just knew that they were different. They just approached clients different, and they approached the work different. And it took a very long time to finish the entire process, because it's about a 5 to 7 year program. And I did it for much longer because I had some obstacles along the way. But 2 years ago, finally, after many years prior, having completed all my coursework and everything that's involved in it, I did defend my dissertation and my paper, and got certified as a psychoanalyst 2 years ago. And it does definitely impact the way I work with clients. So I tend to not emphasize it enough, but it's a huge part of the way I work as a professional.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
You finally did it.
I did. It was a
Amazing.
long journey. Yeah.
Amazing. So one thing we can also be proud of is all of us, the work that we do, we love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you're all engineers.
Yes, we all are.
That's
Yeah.
great. I'm amazed by engineers. Honestly, I have great respect for what it takes to be able to be an engineer, and the intelligence and the persistence it takes to get that degree. And I have even more respect for the fact that you chose mental health as your first topic, because that doesn't always go hand in hand with the pure sciences. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
So the idea came when me and Shravan, we both were discussing. So whenever I drive home and he drives home, we just talk on the phone, and somehow we end up talking about helping people in some way. And we stumbled
Cool.
upon Satvik, who's my longtime friend. So he was also trying to do something about this. So we were like, why don't you join us? We already set everything up. We need a person to motivate us. We pulled Satvik in. And we decided to help people somehow. So the whole point of Break the Matrix is to help people break their own matrices that they've built. So that's how this happened. And self-help seemed like the best way to do that. So
Very cool.
here we are. So the
Fantastic.
first episode is going to be about stress. And now that we've established the baseline that all of us enjoy the work that we do, how stressful are our days generally? And what do you think about stress?
Well, I mean, stress in itself, obviously, doesn't have just one meaning. Without stress, we don't grow. We're not challenged. If parents were to provide all literally any and every need that a child had, it would be the worst thing possible that could happen. We all need, from the time we're so young, the different types of stress, different quantity of it, I suppose, and different types, to challenge us to have to be able to learn and grow and thrive. Obviously, people, I think, tend to think of stress and they think of being overwhelmed or being, at their limit. And then obviously there's a degree involved. Stress is just part of life, and of course it's a matter of each person's journey to figure out what is their way of being able to manage it.
That is very interesting. So you mentioned types of stress and the amount of stress that we're subjected to, right? What are all the types of stress that we have? I just think that, I come from a hard day's labor at work. I'm like, okay, I'm stressed. That's what I think stress is.
Well, I suppose there's different kinds of stress, no? I mean, there's the stress we feel from outside of us, the pressures that we have from society, the pressures that we feel from our families, our parents, people that have children, and so forth. There's what we tell ourselves we're supposed to be doing at this age, what we're supposed to have achieved, how much money, how much success, how far along in a relationship, so forth and so on. I mean, most of it, the most important part, I think, the most significant stress is clearly that which we put on ourselves, because we are all in the world and involved in experiencing, the stress of our bosses have expectations of us, or we have deadlines, or we have to drive in, in New Jersey, you have to drive in some pretty bad traffic to be able to get to work or get wherever you're going. I know you guys are in different cities. But depending on how we respond to that is really the key thing. And I would dare say that the most significant stress that we all tend to deal with is that which we put on ourselves.
Yeah. So, what do you think are the most common causes of stress in today's world? Like you said, all the types of stress that we have, right? And you said there's external stress and the stress that we put ourselves through. So why do you think people do that? And what causes all of this stress?
Like I said, I think that, we have expectations of ourselves, we have expectations that were put upon us. That varies from household to household and family to family and culture to culture. And, where does it come from? It comes from multiple places. Sometimes stress might be something that's very basic. The stress people have when they're poor and they don't have enough money to be able to pay their bills. The stress of living in parts of the world where you don't have the basic necessities to be able to live or to remain safe, physically or otherwise. I think in America, we're really good at creating it ourselves. We have so much, but people can put an amazing amount of pressure on themselves based upon the idea that they're not achieving enough, that they're not, they didn't get married yet. It's not all of it is within ourselves. I can share with you that a very universal stress that I've been speaking about with clients in the recent past has been the election in the United States. And that has caused a tremendous amount of stress on the people that I have been working with, in that they are very fearful of what's going to happen next. And I'm not in any way attempting to try to make this conversation political, but it just so happens to be that I have a number of clients who are absolutely terrified and fearful and talk about this regularly, about what are we going to do and how are we going to get through this time and what country can I move to instead. So to me that's a quote unquote real stress, because it's it's not something we're just making up.
Right. I've always thought of stress being related to relationships with people, or work related stress, or career related stress, or academic related stress. But then political stress, that is a very newfound thing for me. Like I've been hearing it from a lot of friends in America, but then I've not predominantly heard it from where we are. I still understand that how the future is going to be and the uncertainty of it might cause a lot of stress to people, and it's natural that they freak out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people feeling that maybe some extreme things might happen, and that some of the systems and that Americans theoretically rely upon may not stand, may not continue, that the rule of law wouldn't be upheld. Like, that's a pretty terrifying thought if you grow up your whole life counting on the fact that there are consequences when people do things. And
right.
And also it depends on, different groups of people are being targeted more so too. So I think some individuals I work with are in those groups, maybe people who are amongst the LGBTQ community, or people of color, or people who are immigrants, are more concerned about whether their rights will be upheld, as well as tremendously women who are concerned about the right to have, control over what happens to their body and their health. So in that regard, it makes sense to be frightened. And in those situations, of course, when I'm working with people, I don't have all the answers. I can't, but what I can do is try to help people to identify how can they take care of themselves, sometimes by even moderating how much they dive into this. Like maybe watching the news all day, every day is not a great idea. That's
when you say how much we dive into it, it reminds me that social media and technology are like real stressors in today's date. So have you ever experienced people being stressed because of social media or peer pressure? Because I think they're like real factors, right?
Yeah, I think it is a factor, and I think it can play a role, because I think people's lives sometimes sort of play out on there. It's similar to what I was mentioning before about the idea of, I think, people feeling a pressure to live up to a certain status or achieve a certain something or other, whatever it might be, academically, materially, relationship-wise, and then going on social media and seeing what other people are posting about themselves and their lives, and it adding to their own stress that I'm not as good as these individuals and so forth. So in that
comparison
regard, very much so. Yeah, I think so.
That makes sense. Because I used to use a lot of social media before, but now I don't. And my attention span's gotten a little better from before.
Yeah, it's interesting because people I've been speaking to who've been concerned about the election and this and that, and they said, oh, I'm going to watch less news, or I'm going to go on the internet less. I thought, wow, isn't that fabulous? That they're going to have a little, they're maybe going to do something healthier for themselves,
Right.
So there's this influx of too much information which might overload an individual opinion with a mass of opinions. So that's when I believe which would affect the person's thinking and maybe cause them a lot of more stress through social media. So
exactly. It's an exacerbation of what's already there, what's already existing.
I think that's what social media does. It exaggerates and exacerbates like a lot of things.
Yeah, I think
so.
That's
one other very interesting question that one of my friends asked was, we all get stressed from time to time, and stress is like a common thing that everybody goes through on a daily basis, right? So, are there individuals with certain personality traits or genetic mutations or behaviors that are susceptible or prone to more stress?
I'd say that, each person does have a different set of characteristics or a tendency to have their stress manifest in a different way. I guess I think to myself that there are individuals who are more inclined to end up experiencing anxiety. How much of that is genetic, how much of that is learned and, taught. I don't know those answers exactly, but there are definitely some people who just worry or just experience fear, anxiety much more readily than other people. For other people, it might manifest in terms of being depressed. For other people, it might drive them, that they just, they're more and more successful because they just drive themselves into activity, into channeling it in a good way. But I'd say that, to an extent, we're all influenced by stress, just in me that there's a lot of different variables that makes a difference into how it comes to play and how it manifests in us. I probably tend to look often with people the most at, what their environment, how it taught them to manage it, what your parents are like, for example, makes a big difference in terms of, how you're going to handle stressors in your life. If you have a parent that's very particular, calm or encouraging and chill, and that might allow you to recognize that, okay, so there's a problem and there's something I have to do, there's an obstacle I have, but I can handle it and I'll be able to. Whereas other people might be absolutely freaking out and dumping that anxiety on their child, and that child takes on the same characteristics. So
conditioning plays a pivotal role in how a person handles stress?
It plays a pivotal role in everything, no? I think so. I think so. I think so.
True.
But we're not limited by that either. We can go beyond it. We're not stuck just because we grew up in one type of environment.
That is correct. We're not limited by it, but then it is what drives us for a certain period of time until we realize that it is conditioning that is actually driving us and not realization itself, right?
If we can start to recognize that there's reasons why we are the way we are, then hopefully we can be kinder to ourselves and approach ourselves in more of a curious way as opposed to a critical way. And that can make a big difference in terms of being able to learn to be able to, handle things in a different way.
When you say recognize,
Yeah.
how should a person recognize stress in themselves? Because sometimes people don't even know that they're in stress or burnt out.
That's a good point. I think you're right. There's a lot of different ways, I guess, of being able to recognize it in oneself. Sometimes it's a matter of paying attention to one's body and just feeling, sometimes we don't realize how tense we might feel, and it's literally we're carrying it in our bodies. And other times we can realize it in terms of recognizing about how we're interacting with people. Are we short or snappy, or are we, taking our tempers or stress out on other people? Sometimes it can be about what are the kinds of lifestyles that we're leading to be able to manage stress? How much are we drinking, using drugs, or whatever it might be that we might be doing? And we're doing it more so because we're not looking at what it is that we're upset about or struggling with.
So would you say that if we start looking at our own behavior and then we also start looking at how we project ourselves onto other people, we might recognize how stressed we are about something, or if we are stressed or not?
I think so. Of course, for myself, I would say, given the work I do and the experience I have with my field, a lot of times we don't realize a lot about ourselves until we start interacting with somebody else. So for example, I have worked with plenty of people who come to therapy, and it's not until they come to therapy and they begin to actually open up and discuss whatever it is they're carrying inside of themselves that sometimes they realize so much more of what they're struggling with. Because that's how we survive as well, too, is to push things away and block things away. But it harms us too. So we need it, but it blocks us as, it can be harmful to us. But that's what's kind of fantastic about therapy, is that when you come to therapy, when a person chooses to come to therapy, as much as sometimes people think, oh, the therapists have all these answers, and it's not necessarily that therapists have all the answers, but they're helping to provide an environment where you can start to hear yourself speak. And hearing yourself speak, when you're speaking out loud to another person, is very different than thoughts just going around in your head. And then you can really learn so much more about yourself in that environment, in that relationship.
But it is expensive, though.
It is, but it's really expensive not to. To take care of yourself.
There's no denying that now.
Yeah. At least it is true in America that, insurance policies are required to cover mental health services,
Correct.
And so there are ways to be able to get services, even if people don't have health insurance, like I mentioned about the program I used to run. And a lot of other things are really expensive too, that we don't think too much about.
Right.
Like including the things that we might do to cope. I have clients who will talk about, worrying about money or how much therapy could be or this and that. But if they figure out how many bottles of wine they might buy a week, or, how much other things they might buy or use or do, we don't think about that because that's just a different part of our life.
So for all the people listening, next time you want to buy a wine bottle, put it in a piggy bank towards your therapy.
Well, most of the clients I work with pay a copay, and they pay a copay probably of I happen to take insurance, so if you have insurance and you find a therapist who takes insurance, then, what are you paying, $25 to maybe in a session?
That is true. So majorly another question that bugs me is we all come from different cultures, and stress is perceived and it's managed differently in different cultures. So culture also is a pivotal factor, just like conditioning. So what is your take on that?
I think it's extremely important whenever anybody chooses to go to a therapist, that subject get brought into the discussion. I mean, if I, as a therapist, am working with someone, especially someone whose race or, background or whatever is different than mine, I will ask them, what is it like working with somebody who's not of your background? And how does it feel talking with someone who's totally comes from a different background? And I'll ask people to educate me and teach me about, what's unique to, what is playing such an important role as well too, if I don't understand. And I even could understand, but how do I know what that particular person's experience of their culture is? I find that the most important thing to do is not assume that you know, and invite people to feel free to share what their experience is, particularly if you're talking about people coming to therapy. And I mean, because of race and different issues, there's power dynamics and so forth, that's all important to put on the table and to talk about, And I say that, I mean that sometimes when I worked at the last agency I worked at, where I was the director of the outpatient department, one of my challenges in the 10 years that I was the director is that I was continuously trying to find more therapists of color. Because when individuals came to work to get services, I very often did not have anybody that I could offer them to be able to meet with who were from their background, which I thought was not fair. Most people end up being white and Jewish, and didn't match all the other people that came in. So I don't feel like I made nearly the progress in it that I would have liked to have, but I still think that's a very important thing. That being said, I don't think two people have to be of the same background for them to be able to be successful in therapy. That is, it's a matter of whether there's respect and curiosity and openness, and an openness to have each person share what their experience is.
That's true. But so from what I've noticed is that there are some cultures or like people from a specific certain backgrounds who don't think stress is real. Like they believe that I don't probably not real is a bad way to put it. They think stress is normalized and is a part of life, and there is nothing to talk about there. So in a general notion, it's like, yeah, I'm stressed, so what? I still have to do what I have to do to provide for my family, or to get success in my career. So
right.
How do you think such thinking helps? Does it help or is it detrimental?
I would imagine that there are feelings involved in a person saying these things, because there are many feelings people have about going and talking to someone about their problems and concerns. And culture also plays a big role in that as well too. Some cultures it's much more of a stigma to go outside of your own group or community or whatever, family, to talk about problems. But I think that people to some extent are, finally universally fearful, fearful of being judged, fearful of being criticized, fearful of their feelings, of communicating them and feeling them even more, fearful of thinking that when they go to therapy, they're going to find out that they're even more messed up than they thought they were. And I've said this to so many people I've ever worked with, that it's almost always the absolute opposite, that people who choose to come to therapy, or at least I can speak of my doing therapy, is that individuals will end up learning that there's reasons why they struggle the way that they do. And very often, and not only would anybody else in their shoes experiencing, walking the same path as they did, be suffering or struggling in the same way they are, but maybe they're actually doing an amazing job relative to where they've come from or what they've experienced. But they're not looking at it that way. They're just looking at their deficits or their difficulties.
So we had some more questions in the first segment, so I'll be asking a couple of more questions.
Okay.
Do you have any questions that I can ask you so that we can bring it out to the world? Because am I missing something? Because we're talking about stress, right?
I think what you just brought up about people being hesitant to getting help, I think is a pivotal one. I think that
Okay.
it's a critical one, because I think that despite the fact that I think that it's so much more common now for people to acknowledge that they, are needing help or they go to get help, I think there's tons and tons of people who don't or would never would, and they suffer unnecessarily. It would be so lovely if it was not nearly as big of a deal as it is for people, maybe especially earlier on in people's lives, so they can learn to be kinder to themselves as time goes on, as well as people who may be suffering from some real severe symptoms. People who have panic attacks, people who have depression, like clinical depression, or any other more serious diagnoses and so forth. They are treatable. They're really treatable. I've said this to countless numbers of people that I have ever worked with or met who were depressed, even when they were quite depressed, like fairly severely depressed, that I always say that I have a huge advantage sitting and talking with this person, saying to them that I know it is very possible that in 6 months' time, we could be talking to each other and you could be feeling a lot different than you are right now. And being able to help a person by instilling hope in them that things can be better makes an enormous difference in terms of the likelihood that they'll stick with the therapy and that they'll do what they need to do to take care of themselves.
Does it begin with the fact that, like, for example, ability to handle their mental health? Because if I cover a one layer about stress, which is affecting their mental health, it's because I believe a lot of them are not able to accept themselves and often repent on a lot of things that have happened in their past, or keep pressing on a individual event of their past and making that to affect present, which in turn is affecting their future. So is this a common kind of thing that we find around in people because of which they are not able to handle the stress, or how does that usually go?
I guess I think, if I understood what you were saying correctly, I think that we're not always able to see ourselves very well, and whatever kinds of things any of us have dealt with when we're growing up and so forth, we don't even necessarily recognize that it was difficult for us. We can grow up in a family, in a household where there are some major challenges. There could be, all kinds of stressors and difficulties. But when we're children and we're dealing with these things, first of all, it's all we know. We don't necessarily know what's going on behind the closed doors of other people. Secondly, if it's something significantly difficult to deal with, abuse or whatever it might be in your life, one of the ways you're going to survive it is by not feeling it. That's what our psyches do, our unconscious, our minds do, is to work to have all kinds of defenses and ways of being able to protect ourselves, because we need to have some distance from this to be able to cope. I've described it before to people that when you try to think about sometimes what your life might have been like and see like whether it was difficult or so forth, I said it's like asking a goldfish, what does the water feel like? They don't, what are you talking about? Like, this is all I know. I don't even recognize that there's anything around me, And I honestly believe that it often takes for people to be maybe in their 20s or older, to be that far removed from their families sometimes, to be able to realize, well, that was really messed up. This happened or that happened, or I was treated this way, or this was my role in the relationship, or my parents treated me this way, my sibling that way, or whatever it might have been. Like, we need some distance from it, and it shapes us tremendously, but there's such a capacity to have things be different and to grow by just learning those things, just being able to have awareness. A lot of times I'll say, is it just about being able to bear witness to your own life?
Agreed. I mean, I perfectly get that, but added to one small thing I would like to add on there. So at the point where we get awareness about what happened, maybe something that was messed up in the past, you get hundreds of thoughts, and I hear this a lot in a few books that I read earlier. It's like you fall into that feedback loop of hell, and where all the negative things that have happened even in all your life, they keep coming on to you, and that's when you can't have a structured and logical approach to navigate and solve those things. Then what would be a way for an individual then? I mean, there are people who are open to coming up to a therapist and talking it out, but still there are some, when we went back to the culture, so there are some cultures where talking about this is still a taboo, or it's difficult for them to come out. So what can they probably do
What are
in
the
this
things
case?
they do to help themselves?
Help them structure their thoughts and have them a logical way to go it forward.
I think the challenge sometimes in structuring your thoughts has to do with managing your feelings. And that's the bigger obstacle in a way. But as you were talking, what kind of came to my mind when I started thinking about what are things that people can do that are separate from, say, going to therapy and so forth, there's a lot of things people can do. And some of them are very steeped in certain cultures, like meditation is a very powerful and positive thing to be able to help oneself. Yoga, these are all things that have an ability to be able to help you to some extent with your mind and body, and so forth, and are critically valuable to be able to do. At least those are the first couple things that come to my mind. That they're not therapy, but they're damn well therapeutic, for sure.
So,
I mean, I'm sorry, I was going to say the other came to my mind too is, sports and athletics can be, so can music, so can, there's a lot of different things that people, art, and so forth, channeling their feelings into, or just giving them a sense of being able to feel like they have something they can do that can help them find peace. Yeah, so you have a sense of control too. By the way, all those things I think are great even when you're going to therapy.
absolutely. I completely agree to that. So,
yeah.
Circling on to the topic, the main topic is about stress, right? So what do you think are some ways how a person can handle stress? Because stress comes in different shapes and forms and different types. So on a daily basis, what is the common stress that people talk about in their daily lives to you in therapy?
I guess one of the most common ones, I guess, would be relationships. People talk all the time about, their partners, their children, their parents, these are maybe their bosses, their coworkers, but yeah, relationships is a pretty common one for sure. Sometimes people will be complaining or upset about some of these stressors, and then also recognizing that they're actually grateful that they do have like a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, you know what I mean? But it always comes with these kinds of things. And there's plenty of other common ones too, people being concerned about career. In some cases, some of the ones that can be very serious and difficult can be people coming to therapy because they have difficulty regarding their health. I happen to be working with an individual currently who's terminally ill, and that's a whole different category in terms of, if you talk about stress, it's challenging for me as well because I have very strong feelings working with the person, and that they're, going in this direction, and it's something that's challenging me. I'm certain that I'm learning as a result of it. It's part of why I do love, though, the field, because it's not just using your head, it's using your heart too. It's caring, and it, I really love solving problems and so forth, and figuring things out intellectually. I always liked that my whole life, but I've always been interested in a field that would combine head and heart.
True, I can relate to that too.
Yeah,
problem solving. I think all of us can relate to it. We love problem solving. So
I'm sure, absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why we love what we do.
For sure.
And also today we're here to solve people's problems. So that too. And one thing is the general consensus that we received from people, because we sent out a form to gather what people are stressed about. And the real, the main reason that people are stressed about is, like you said, relationships. Most of them are stressed about relationships, and that is a whole new beast to tackle. But I want to ask this question, that in relationships, we all feel stresses, but then how does it project outwards? Like, what are the physical symptoms of stress? Because sometimes we don't realize. Sometimes people are in dependent relationships. From the data we gathered, it's evident that people who are in codependent relationships are more stressed, and they don't know that they're in stress. They get addicted to the toxic cycle of being in that, and they're stressed about it all the time. So what are the physical manifestations and how to get out of that?
What are the manifestations of the stress, or what is it you have to do to get out of those kind of situations? Maybe I'm not sure your question.
What is that?
I don't think I understood exactly what your question was when you said that.
So in like you said, right, the relationships are generally what people talk about when they're stressed, right? That relationships are a primary cause for the stress in their life. So when people are in codependent relationships, they get used to stress, and sometimes they don't know that they're in stress. So sometimes it physically manifests in certain forms, but they still get addicted to the relationship, and they still stay in those relationships, and they don't address the physical symptoms of stress itself. So what kind of physical symptoms do people generally come up to when they come to therapy, and how do you suggest them to deal with it?
Well, to be quite honest, when people come to me where they specifically have distinct physical symptoms of any type, I always encourage them to first go to their doctor and to make sure that they're getting any medical problems ruled out, because to try to address them from a psychological point of view without getting that checked out first is be unethical. But I guess the whole idea of codependent relationships, there's so many different types of them, they could be codependent in terms of, well, you're talking about substance abuse and that kind of thing. You're involved with somebody who has an addiction, and you continue to keep on fostering that. And even those types of relationships are quite different depending on whether you're talking about like a parent with a child, and the child has a drug or alcohol problem, and that parent's not addicted to their child. Their parent is like desperately wanting to help them or change them, improve them or save them, but sometimes realizing that they need to do something stern and firm to be able to help them by like not facilitating them continuing to be involved in their addiction, or not bailing them out when they have things that happen. I think you were wanting to focus specifically on physical symptoms, though. I think you were saying. Yeah,
because those are things that are visible to us, right? Feelings, sometimes people don't understand feelings too. So
True.
How to recognize those things? Because people have a hard time doing that.
No, you're right. I mean, it's true. Like sometimes people are more likely to notice the fact that they have headaches, or that they have
hard time falling asleep.
Yeah, exactly. Difficulty sleeping, for sure. Difficulty concentrating. Sometimes having panic attacks, which are incredibly physical. And a lot of times people don't really realize that that's what the case is. I think you're right, though. I have worked with a number of people who were really not good at being able to name what their feelings were. But we would work together to start getting them to start being more cued into what do they feel in their body. And the more they began listening to and being aware of what they were feeling in their body, the more that they could be able to start putting words to it, that it was actually feelings that they were having. I remember working with a first responder once, sometimes years ago, and first responders are taught are needing to not feel their feelings, so to speak, so that they can be able to go into these dangerous situations, or high stress situations, and help people. And so it makes even more sense that they would be feeling them in their body. But gradually, through working on it and talking together, I can start to recognize that, like, oh, I was having these pains in my chest, and then I realized that I was actually sad, or something like that, and then they say whatever doesn't come out your mouth comes out your body. So if you can name what you're feeling, or you're being able to work towards being able to know what you're feeling better, your body doesn't have to carry it for you. I think I gave you a very circuitous answer there.
That's a very good way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
For a minute, I was like, wait, if your mouth knows how to put it out, then you know what's happening. So like, that's a very,
Very well
I mean,
put.
interesting, and it just felt, wow, like, that's a good way to put it out. So
The last thing I said, you mean about whatever doesn't come out your mouth comes out your body?
Yes.
yes.
It's very true. It really is.
Really is.
Actually, well, it's very interesting for anyone who's ever actually done yoga, for example, or massage and so forth. People will be known to engage in those activities and then begin to cry because their bodies are holding the feelings. And I've spoken to various yoga instructors who've said, oh yeah, it's common. Like, it's no big deal to them because they've seen it happen so many times, because we're holding these things inside of us, which is goes back to your comment about, therapy being expensive. So is medical care when you get sick or when you have other serious illnesses. It's a lot more expensive than going to outpatient therapy.
I mean, preventive care is still more affordable than going to a reactive care, right? So
Yeah.
Absolutely, by all means.
Agreed. And now that, so off the record, so I'm doing a meditation retreat in the next 10 days. So I'll be meditating for 10 days away from the whole world.
That's great.
So I mean, now that we're talking about it, I'm just in the back of the mind, okay, will I cry that day? Okay, let's see.
We're gonna make a whole new episode out of that.
No, meditation. I've probably been on one meditation retreat maybe in my life, but yeah, I have to admit, I probably have encouraged more people to meditate than I've gotten myself to do it. I mean, I've done it to some extent, but I believe in it wholeheartedly.
I think I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
Mary, I have one question. Like, people might not have enough time to meditate. Sometimes they forget and all those things. So I have heard one story where one of my friends who I was talking to was mentioning that he's having very difficulty when he tries to meditate. Whenever he closes eyes, everything which causes him stress flashes before him, and it becomes harder and harder for him to maintain the thing, to be very consistent doing meditation in the stressful life. Like, he works a lot, like his work career is 12 hours a day. So for those kind of people, do you think there is any other alternative apart from meditating which helps them to handle their stress better?
I mean, I know I'm very biased, but obviously I really do believe in the idea of being able to talk about whatever the stressors are, whatever the things are that are coming to their mind. I feel very bad hearing about this person, that sounds pretty terrible, that is plaguing them so much, to have that, have it just pop in their head. And yeah, I've worked with number of people who that's been the case, like intrusive thoughts, basically, you can't stop thinking about whatever the subject matter might be. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of, you don't necessarily get quick fixes for things like that. You almost want to believe that if that's what the person is dealing with, there's a reason why they are, why it is. It's almost like it's happening for a reason, meaning like it's maybe going to serve a purpose, so you can learn more about whatever that thing might be, or just learn about, have a different relationship to yourself. I mean, sometimes people do have more tendencies towards having intrusive thoughts, or tendencies towards like OCD type of, characteristics. But I think that they would benefit from like working directly with somebody where they could be able to talk about it, because then they don't feel like they're also maybe fully carrying it alone. And that's a big part of the experience. So, but yeah, I think if a person's struggling that much when they're trying to meditate, they're thinking about it so much, then that, yeah, it would really be beneficial for them to be able to hopefully talk about it. Something that I've done working with a lot of people I've worked a lot with people with traumas, trauma histories, all different types of trauma histories. And sometimes when I'm working with someone who's discussing something that I know is very powerful and sets off a lot of emotion in them and so forth, is I'll suggest, well, how about if, like, at the end of the session, you just leave that here with me and I'm going to hold on to it, and don't worry about thinking about it for the rest of the week. Now, that may or may not work. They may not be able to, but I've suggested I'll keep it right here. And when you come back, we can pick it up again. So it's kind of the idea of finding a way to give yourself some space.
Yeah. So, like going forward with that, some people, like for example, me, so many think that social media is stressing them out a lot, but I have dealt with it and I came up with a strategy that I will use social media as an accountability tool to know whether I'm doing the task or not. For example, I try to post content daily so that whenever I want to look back where I was, okay, I was 10 days back this and now I am this. And along with it, I am becoming more and more consistent. So I guess sometimes stress for different aspects might help us, right? So what do you think that the biggest misconception around this, that stress is only a negative thing? How we can utilize the stress in our favor? For example, there are many things which people do in stress that they are not able to do in their normal life. So do you think that there is any positive aspect which can help a person?
I hear what you're saying. I agree with you. It's funny when you're talking about this idea of that sometimes you can do things when you're under stress that you couldn't do otherwise. I know I was just talking before about the fact that I've been speaking to quite a few people in my practice who've been acutely stressed by the election and the outcome of the election. But the interesting thing is that I've talked with quite a few of them have identified things that they're going to try to do instead of focusing on the news. One of them's going to, two of them were going to work on a book that they started writing. Another one was going to be doing more painting. Someone else was going to get themselves involved more in exercise. So in that regard, I think it's the same thing. It's sort of like sometimes because we are in that way, something good might have come of it. And we don't always look at it that way. But
like follow-up question on it. So as you said, some people might work out. So do you think that working out in the stress is a good form of coping up with it, or it might damage your body? Because many people go ego lift during their stress. So it now the social media is promoting this agenda. If you are feeling something bad, then you need to just go and do workout in gym or any type of physical thing, and it will help you cope up with it. So is it clinically proven, or do you back it, or you have another type of understanding over it?
I think that, like most answers to almost anything, the answer is it depends. And also it's the idea of it. I could never think that it would be a bad thing to go and use exercise and working out. But of course, it's always a matter of degree. If you, like you just said, if you're going to go to the gym and you're going to ego lift and you're going to go overboard with it, then that's not listening to your body. That's not being kind to yourself. But I mean, it's a known fact that exercise is a natural antidepressant. Getting some form of exercise, just walking, just some form of movement is an absolute known thing, that it helps to release endorphins. It helps us to be healthier. But again, like you said, then that doesn't mean that you should be throwing yourself into it like 12 hours a day, or going for a walk when it's freezing and not dressing properly. You know what I mean? Like, you still have to always take care of yourself. But definitely exercise it's one of many good components of how to take care of yourself. I often encourage people to think about when they're under a tremendous amount of stress or struggling or doing poorly, is to go to the basics. Number one is always, more than anything else, sleep. Pay attention to your sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting good quality sleep? Are you getting enough hours? Exercise is on the list too. So is drinking water. Are you eating healthy? Eating healthy is not one thing. Many people call eating healthy very many different ideas, but there are some basic concepts we all know that eating healthy means, including making sure you eat. But like sometimes the basics are the hardest things to do when someone's really panic-stricken, really depressed. having intrusive thoughts, whatever it might be, I say write it down, make a list, make sure every day, am I doing these things? It sounds simplistic, but it'll get a person back on a path.
So you say that balance is the key for everything. Try to understand what is the need and how
Sure.
he's helping you, right?
Sure. And by and large, most all problems are not caused by one thing. Solutions don't come from one place. Even though I keep banging the drum of therapy, I know that you need all these other things in addition. I just advocate for the therapy part because not everybody does it, and because I do think it can be amazing.
So yeah, like there is another question from one of my closest friends. So he's facing generally a problem regarding his job career because he's not having job right now. So he basically is very good at what he does, but current market is not very appropriate, which is causing him to panic. So I want to ask here that what is the friend as a aspect help you in improving your stress levels? Do you think that a person need to contact other person when they are stressed out, or just some people think that okay, if I'm calling in my stress time, they I might cause him stress or think over things which he's not even thinking? So do you think that friendship should also be a factor where one need to help each other in these times, or it is always a good idea to be very professional and go meet a therapist?
Oh, no, I think friends are a huge component. In fact, going to therapy can be a way of helping people to improve their friendships and have more friendships and have more support. It's not like to be exclusive to just the one professional area, but it's good to have both for sure, and it is a good thing to be able to turn to friends. It's just that sometimes it's true. Sometimes, you don't necessarily want to dump all your stuff. You don't want to say these very personal things, to a friend. You'd prefer to say it someplace where it's private and it's going to never go anywhere because it's legally protected. And it can be very good to be able to, though, have friends to talk about things with too, because sometimes it helps them put things in perspective. And sometimes your friend might be able to just help you realize that, I know it feels like the end of the world right now, but you're really not as bad off as you think you are. You're on an okay path, and that could be helpful in and of itself. It's a very challenging thing, and it's difficult for so many people. I know of intelligent, educated people who are having trouble finding work. That's a really big pressure, because then it's the everyday of like, I'm supposed to be doing this, and I feel not like.
Yeah, basically I can attest to it because my friend Bharadwaj was one of the source when I was in very stressful life. I used to call him, and even though it was very not direct to what I was going through, but the things of wisdom he used to give to me at that point of time would have actually helped me to deviate from what I'm thinking, and it helps me to overcome my overthinking. So based on that, how you think that overthinking will really cause you a very high amount of stress and like prolonged stress? Does overthinking is one of the key factors nowadays youngsters facing, which is causing them stress?
Yeah, I certainly think that overthinking can be. I think that it's a matter of learning from yourself. And first of all, it sounds like it's wonderful that your friend has been so supportive to you and helpful to you.
That friend is me.
No, I know. I think it's cool.
Thank you.
And I think sometimes it's about being able to recognize that whatever this characteristic of ours, like overthinking, that can torture us, is also a characteristic that may be so helpful in other areas of our lives. Like, because you're an overthinker, you might be very analytical, you can really get into details, you can really be very good at your job or something technical or whatever it might be. The challenge is being able to allow yourself or enable yourself to turn it off, to be able to back off from it, but to not condemn yourself for the act of doing it. I wholeheartedly believe that one of the big components for anyone of being able to feel better and solve their problems is to be more accepting of themselves and to be kinder to ourselves. And it's so easy to say, and it's a lifetime of effort. It's a lifetime goal, is to learn to be more self-accepting and be kinder. But I think the people who are healthiest, happiest are those people who are able to see even their challenges as being part of their strengths. You know, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's
So-
very great.
Yeah. So one other case I wanted to discuss was, it's more like a case that is related to more people. So there's two things called imposter syndrome and self-doubt that many of the people that I've talked to have spoken about in their
Mhm.
careers or in their works or in their academics.
Mm-hmm.
They are really intelligent people and they know what they're doing, they're good at it, but they still face something called an imposter syndrome, and they're plagued with self-doubt. They don't know how to move on from that. So how should a person actually deal with the thought that they're not good enough, or whatever their decision is going to be wrong, or how to take a step forward thinking in a confident manner when part of your brain is like, you can't do this?
Mm-hmm. I think that people who struggle with imposter syndrome, which I think is a heck of a lot of people, often experience it throughout their life. Not like they just reach there's an age and then they start to have these doubts. Like they might have felt that way when they were in primary school, you know, or when they were much younger and so forth. So to some extent, I think part of the solution, or part of the one way of working towards it, is getting the thoughts out of your head. Because like we have so many of these thoughts that go round and round and round, and they torture us more because like we have to live with ourselves and our own thoughts and wake up with ourselves and so forth. And that's what I was meaning before when I was talking about the idea of the benefit of being able to talk in the presence of another person, because you're also daring to like be your own vulnerable self, you know, which is contradicting to the whole idea of imposter syndrome, where you just pretend that you're great, which is exhausting as heck, you know, doing that. But being able to be authentically yourself, whether it's in therapy, whether it's amongst friends, and then people are accepting, it's a way of being able to sort of challenge some of that notion of like, oh, I'm just a fraud. Oh, I'm just not that really good at this, you know? I do think that sometimes it can be helpful to be able to try to understand, how did this come to be? Like, because everyone's imposter syndrome may not be the same, you know, it could have been developed from different early circumstances. And sometimes it's helpful, it doesn't have to be this way, but sometimes it's helpful to understand, why is it that I started thinking this way about myself? And how did it come to be that I started doubting myself so much? And sometimes there's some real life factors that played a role. And sometimes putting those connections together can sometimes allow us to let go a bit, you know? But I think that dealing with things like imposter syndromes takes time. I don't think it's anything that you just snap and fix, because it's probably been with you for a little while, and maybe it's even serving you in some kind of way. I'm not sure, but sometimes a problem, a symptom can be serving us and we don't even realize the ways in which it's serving us.
But what is a coping mechanism that they can start so that they realize that it's an imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and it's not actually real, and they can take the first step that they're supposed to do?
I think the first step towards making any change, including the change that you're talking about in this particular issue, is trying to be self-aware, trying to notice when you hear yourself telling yourself something. Like you might be, like you said, intelligent, capable, maybe even have a job where I'm proficient in it, but I'm still thinking this other thought. It may have become so habitual to the person to think that way, they don't even notice how often they're on themselves and they're critical of themselves. So very often the very first step in any kind of change process would be just being able to go, hey, wait a second, I'm doing that thing again. I'm saying that thing again. And when you start to develop that, you've already changed, because you're using your observing ego, using another part of your mind. You're developing more your observing ego to be able to notice, like, I'm doing something to myself right now. This is a tape I'm playing in my own head. Don't even tell yourself to change. Don't even expect yourself to change. Just notice it. Just notice what it is that you would like for it to be different. Notice I'm like, oh, I'm saying that thing again. And it starts to take some of the power away from it and it allows for something to change. Because we can't change anything until we're actually aware that we're doing it. And more often than not, I think that people, including people with imposter syndrome, they don't even hear themselves. They don't even hear how often they're giving themselves crap.
That is very true. So, I mean, when you were talking, I realized that if a person who has an imposter syndrome thinks from a perspective that it is not me thinking, but what if a friend tells me about these struggles, what advice would I give to that friend? Right. So when a person thinks like that, then they will see how logical or illogical the thought itself is.
True.
So yeah, that's a solution, guys. So remember that.
Observing and noticing is something I prescribe to people all the time. And sometimes you have to prescribe it. You prescribe it for a long time, and then gradually the process it can change. You can just start. You suddenly start noticing that you're a little bit more on your own side. It's amazing how much energy we put into not being on our side sometimes.
So,
and just I'd like to add something here, since I loved what you said. Like, it's being an observer from the outside and trying to look at a situation sometimes, because when we are in a first person view, there's a bit called emotion attached to that, and when we go to the third person view, we can take away the emotion and we can just straightforward think logically and try to get an answer out there. So that's something, it's something that very much resonates with what you have said and what which I am trying to learn at this point of time, to ensure that that's the way to deal with my stresses and deal with my problems. So that's something everyone is learning these days. So any one of us.
I practice it too.
one other thing that when we were doing research about how do we take these episodes into a good direction, one of my friends suggested, and we also discussed amongst ourselves, that we want to give tips and techniques regarding a specific topic to people, and how to tackle that specific topic, which is stress in this case. So what are the techniques, like top 5 techniques that you tell your people, or that you do to manage stress in your daily life? Different kinds of stress. It might be like you're overburdened with work, you've been working more than 12 hours a day, or it's a relationship problem, or it's as a parent it's a problem, or a worldly problem, whatever that is. So give us some techniques that you use and you generally suggest.
The first thought I had when you were asking that or requesting a list like that is, number 1, breathe. I mean, in any given situation, and I do practice it myself too, like that leads to also being more physically aware of yourself, because we can so often not realize how much we are feeling physically tense in our body. So I can be honest with you and say that there are times when, if I'm aware at all that I'm worried or stressed, and I just start taking some good deep breaths, sometimes my shoulder will crack. Then I'm like, damn, like then that maybe means it might be a good idea to do some stretching or something like that too. I think breathing is the biggest one of all, because you can do it anytime, anywhere, driving, walking, going to bed, waking in the morning, in the shower, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. And it's because it's so linked to our physical selves, and it is so linked to our emotional selves, because we breathe more shallow when we're anxious. And the special certain kinds of breath affects our vagus nerve, and we literally will actually affect the whole, I think it's parasympathetic system, and can help us to be able to calm down more. Or I think it's a great, simple little technique. I think sometimes another idea I've thought of in terms of dealing with stress is that we can be so focused on whatever the problem is that we have, that it feels like it's the whole entire world, and it's never going to get any better, or it's so dire. And I've actually suggested to clients that they stop for a moment with their life when they feel that way. And you know how you can go onto Google Earth and you can zoom in or you can zoom out. So go in your own life, in your own mind, and just try zooming out. Zoom out and realize this is one moment in your life. And probably in a certain period of time, you're going to be able to look back at this moment and it's not going to be the be all and end all. It's not going to be everything. But I use that silly technical idea because I kind of like zooming in and out of Google Earth. But I've suggested that to people as a way of just basically it's saying is trying to get perspective, you know, trying to give yourself perspective that, including when I'm talking with clients about worrying about the election and, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end. And I mean, sometimes I'll say in those situations, how much do you think you're really helping yourself right now by thinking about every single thing that's going to happen, it's going to change in America that you're going to hate? And they're like, you're right, I know, you know. But we do this to ourselves. So I think sometimes being able to pull out of a situation and realize that like it's a relationship problem, or it's a job, I don't have a job, or it's this or whatever, and it feels like we're on the very razor's edge of everything. And not too much of life is actually on that razor's edge. We just feel like it is. I think that it's really important in terms of dealing with stress that we find ways to play.
Find ways
really
to
good.
play?
Play, absolutely. And play is whatever the heck you mean it to be. If you have a pet that you like to do stuff with, if you play a sport, if you play music, listen to music, dance, you know, moving your body is always great at the same time, but be silly. Like, this ride is too damn short. You know, like, so, I mean, those are some ideas. I'm a big proponent of dance. I think that's a really good one, personally, but
I think so too.
yeah, for sure. I don't really
Helps a
think
lot.
I reached 5, but I don't know how many I got in that list, but there's a few for you.
Those are really good.
Okay.
That zoom in, zoom out was a very
You like that one?
I really like that one. That I've never read or like heard about that. Like, okay.
I made it up. I never heard it anywhere either. I just thought to myself, like, okay, you're just too locked in. And I've been locked in too, but I've been with clients. And it's awful when you feel like, oh my God, it's just like everything is in this moment. Like, it's terror. It's kind of like the way little children feel, so helpless and so lost, you know, and we can feel like that anytime. But if we can actually realize, oh, wait a second, I can just press the zoom out button and see the whole picture, see the whole globe. And that I'm not going to be here that long. It's going to be different.
Although I'm not a proponent of social media, I don't use it a lot. Before, when I was using it, I've seen a small technique of how to realize that a person is stressed is when you hold your thumb like this and you start hearing your heartbeat.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
you keep hearing it. I mean, like, you feel it in your finger, right? As you keep feeling it, somehow you just start calming down.
Oh, wow.
This is
I
my
know
personal tip.
But that makes sense because your pulse is in your thumb, isn't it?
Right.
Right?
You can hold it like this, and you know,
Yeah.
you can if you hold it like not too tightly, then
Yeah.
firmly, then
Yeah.
you start to feel the pulse in your thumb.
Yeah.
As you keep feeling it, your mind is focused on the pulse itself, and it starts to count the pulse. So your mind is taken off of the thing that you're actually worrying about at that moment.
I like that. That's
It's a
good.
silly technique to deviate your mind from.
I think it's good. Silly is good. I'm all in favor of silly. Oh,
Yeah.
adding to the list of things about stress, virtually anything that involves nature. Getting involved and getting immersed in nature. I do know that they say that the color we do best in terms of lowering stress is green. So going amongst trees, you know, forests, that kind of thing. But I don't think it really matters. I think if you're by an ocean, if you're by a stream, if you're in a desert, if you're in a mountain, you're absolutely able to, it's good, it's healthier to manage our stress.
Yeah. Another
Yeah.
very, very silly tip, and or probably a technique or something that I do whenever I'm stressed, is I just stand and I start spinning around. to make myself feel dizzy. Then I just plop on the bed and start laughing for no reason.
We did this as children.
Right.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
I was a kid, that's what we do on the front lawn. We'd spin
Yeah.
the grass until we'd fall down.
It's funny how when we go back to the best memories of our time in our childhood and do something from those times,
Yes.
we start to feel de-stressed from whatever we're dealing with at that point.
Sure.
I call them the zoomies. Dogs do
zoomies.
that.
Yes. All different animals do. Cats do, bunnies
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, we should do the zoomies when we're stressed. That's a technique. You've heard it first on Break the Matrix.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So,
So,
as you go ahead, man.
Go ahead, Shravan. Yeah, go ahead.
So as you said that nature has so much to teach, like whenever you are research, I think that that's one of the best things happened to me during past months. So I was like person who is very introverted and don't like to go out of my room, and even though I have like tons of friends, I am very hesitant of talking to anyone, and I used to talk to only few people. It really helped, as I mentioned, but when I went out and explored the nature, it actually triggered a different aspect of me. Now I see world in a different way. Like whenever I go any place, I try to be more artistic. I become a person, okay, what can I do from this? So I never used to do that. So that keeps my mind busy and helps me to have a productive time rather than just overthinking or something which has nothing to do with my real life. So that has really helped me, like that exploring the nature. Just go and see the nature, and might be one waterfall might help you trigger one idea. Like one of the trip we had as a friends was Miami, and one of my friend who was actually very good at going out, he pitched in an idea and now he started a startup over it. So just going outside, he saw the idea that okay, people are facing problems in certain things, like creating itinerary. Now it's a startup, so might be nature has lot of things to give you, so just
By
go
all means.
explore and you can get a new idea from it.
By all means. I think that's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense. By all
Yeah.
means.
His startup is called Travana.
Okay.
It used to be called Travana. It's called Intrepid now. If you guys
Okay.
are watching this, go and check out Intrepid. And
Yeah.
you don't have to take the hassle and stress of planning a trip. Intrepid will help you with that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes. Also, plunging into the swimming pool also helps. Do a cannonball whenever you're stressed.
Or just go in a cold shower, just keep your head in the shower, it helps. So actually Bharadwaj gave me this trip. So when I was very stressed out, he said, what's the temperature around outside? I said, it's very chill, go outside. I said, why? Just go outside. When I went, I was thinking about how to protect myself from cold rather than thinking about the thing which I was stressing about. So there are like little bit techniques which I guess everyone knows. It's just that one friend who need to just point out, okay, do this, man.
No, you're right. A lot of times it's getting out of our own way.
Yeah. So, like Shravan said, right? So, when something bigger than what we're dealing with pops up, we instantly forget about whatever we're dealing with at that point. Like, think about it this way: you walk a mile away from home, into a park, and there's nowhere you can pee. Now you have to go back 1 mile to pee because there's people all around you, and you can't do it in the woods. See?
It's
No
true.
relationship stress at that point. All you need to do is pee, go back home. And that's going to be probably the satisfying pee of your life.
Especially if it's cold.
See?
The funny thing is that oftentimes too, a way of being able to help with your own stress is to help with somebody else's.
Right.
You know, doing something for somebody else can sometimes just get you out of thinking about you. We usually don't do so well if we focus on ourselves too much all the time.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Mary Ann, this has been a valuable discussion, and I would like Satvik to give the closing remarks. We love having you on the panel.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed the conversation too.
So we generally call Satvik as a cute boy of our group, so that whenever we are stressed out, we see him and instantly become happy, man. He has a very good smile.
Nice.
I am lost, but I'll try to get back to the base again. Once again, it was an amazing podcast with you, Mary Ann. And given that it's our first and it's your first podcast as well, I think things went very well. And thank you so much for your time. And to the audience, all who are watching this, I'll put down a link in the description of this video. If you would like to reach out to Mary Ann to discuss about any of your problems, you can use that link to go ahead and schedule an appointment with her. And we'll also talk about what insurances that she accepts and all those things. I'll be putting down them in the description of this video. And once again, I thank you all for your time. Do like, share, and subscribe.
Wait. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Break the Matrix. I'd like Mary Ann to say that first.
Oh, definitely. Everyone should absolutely like, share, and subscribe to this channel. By all means, it's a wonderful channel. I think it's fantastic. I think that other people who are going to be your guests are going to have a high standard to meet to be able to be as successful as we've been today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, like Mary Ann said, like, share, subscribe, and do comment your feedback. And also, don't forget to turn on your bell icon and be updated with whatever video we put on. Thank you, everybody.